Welcome back to Beautiful Work, Beautiful Life. We're here talking about inner work and your inner life, and we are on a mission to create a beautiful life. I hope you are too. If you're with us, we hope to help you in your endeavors because we know when you make your own life beautiful, you make the world more beautiful. And I think that's a good thing. Don't you, Laurel?
I do. Can I just add that when you start doing the beautiful work, that inner work, you start to see the beauty that already exists in your life,
Yeah.
right? Almost as the launching pad for the creation of more beautiful life.
It's a really fascinating thing, this idea of, I don't know about you, but I kind of am intrigued with the mystical and the magical. And and there's irrationality to it. You know, there's the rational side of life and the irrational side of life. And we've really wanted to like disclaim the irrational for many, many generations, right? And so we're starting to like allow ourselves to go there a little bit more. And so this idea of the mystical and the magical to me is so cool. And I think that you kind of hit on that with that idea of, as we do our inner work, how we start to notice things that are around us and we start to, I think, tune in to things that maybe we were ignoring before. And that feels magical.
It does. It does. And we don't talk much about mystical and magical. We approach this topic of doing the inner work really process, right? We
Yeah.
we really
Practical
do get
process.
into the
Yeah.
practical aspects of it. Well, I have to tell you, I'm I'm taking Neuroscience of Change again, a coaching
Oh,
course with
love it.
Coaches Rising. Now, I took it 4 years ago. They've changed it a bit, of course, because neuroscience has changed. But um, Amanda Blake is the name of the instructor for the first 2 months. Yesterday was our first session, and she was talking about the mystical. Now, she's a
Mhm.
neuroscientist,
Yeah.
and this is a science-based course, and for her to be talking about the mystical, my whole body just lit up. I was so excited to be there.
It's so exciting. I always, if you are out there and you're listening and you're struggling with this idea of the mystical or the magical, right? Um, because of the way that I entered into my spiritual life, it had to do with opening up to this experience of experiencing my own energy, which is something that you can't necessarily measure, see, hear, right? It can be a sensation, it can be an intuitive experience. And so, what I realized for me was energy and spirit are very synonymous in a lot of ways, right? Like you can't see it, you can't touch it. It's greater, it's expansive, it's in you, it's out of you, right? It has all these qualities that are really quite like the divine, and spirit
Yes.
world. Yeah.
And the word that was coming up for me was is faith, right? When you can't see it, you can't feel it. You can sense it, you can believe it,
Yeah.
right? Faith
Something
is
in you knows.
That's right.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
that to me is faith. And what I love about the word faith, when you think about doing the inner work and creating a beautiful life, part of the work is having faith that you are creating or co-creating your beautiful life.
Yes,
Like,
yes.
I don't think you can have a beautiful life without having faith that it's possible and you are worthy of it and are capable of it.
Yes, that can be a big stumbling block for people and a resistance. We
Yeah.
spent last month. Let's get updated on where we are. Last month we talked a lot about all kinds of ways that resistance shows up. And so, if you feel like you resist doing maybe the work that you know you want to do or need to do or kind of want to do or whatever it is, go back and check out last month's podcasts because we got a lot of great stuff in there. This month, we're moving on and we're kind of transitioning in a way that I don't know, includes a little bit of what we talked about last month, but in different ways. And we're talking this month about life lessons and repeating patterns, because a lot of times when we're doing our inner work, we find that we are coming up, what it feels like we're coming up against a wall that we've walked into many, many times. And, or we're in a conversation that feels like, wow, didn't I have this many, many times? Right. And so we do, because we do repeat patterns, and it hopefully is our opportunity to do the work. Yeah.
It is, yeah. And
Yeah.
when you start recognizing those patterns, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So today we have a question for you. And this question, I think, kind of stumps people a lot of times. And so we're going to speak into it. We're going to have a great, hopefully, chit chat today at our kitchen table here, Laurel. And the question for you is, how can someone you struggle with be your teacher?
I love this question.
It's such a transformation of, rather than being frustrated, angered, irritated, disgusted sometimes, right, by somebody. How can we do the transformational work of looking at them and staying still for a minute and saying, wow, I'm really inflamed, or I have a ton of feelings here. This person is stirring up all kinds of stuff. How can I, instead of rejecting them, look at them and say, wow, they're probably here to teach me something. What could it be?
Oh, I love this. The first time that I experienced this exploration of someone that irritated me, right? Oil and water kind of,
Yeah.
or someone who, now looking back on it, I can say it this way. I repeatedly allowed to treat me a certain way, right?
Mm,
So
mm.
it was, hindsight, it was that I allowed it and um wasn't protecting my own boundaries. I wasn't setting my boundaries. But when I first kind of learned this exercise, it was a workshop with Rich Gorsuch, who is my former energy chiropractor, my network care chiropractor. And I was at a workshop, and the instructor took us through this exercise of writing. It was a journaling exercise, writing about someone or thinking of someone that irritated us, that got a rise out of us, and the things that they did that got the rise out of us.
Mm.
So you would write that story, and then the second prompt was write about a time or times when you have done those very same things.
Yeah.
And that was like the biggest aha. It was a lightning bolt. It was like, oh, and we've talked about shadow work before, but this was my
Yes.
introduction of what irritated me or stirred some emotion. What repelled me from this person was the mirroring of things that I also was capable of doing that I did not own or appreciate.
Yeah. Or
Yeah,
or sometimes it can be that we would never allow ourselves to do. Now,
that's
we're not
right.
talking about the things that put you in jail, people. This is not
Right.
where we're going with this. Okay. So
That's
don't
right.
don't go
Right.
out there and say, okay, now I have permission to do all these horrible things in the world. That's not what this is about. It's about breaking down, right? Our thought pattern that makes us different than everybody else, or better, or starts to judge, where everybody's at in the
Yeah,
world, so that we can see that we are that too. We have all qualities. We are capable of all things given the appropriate circumstances.
that's right.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because when you think about, the messenger, right? The
Yeah,
lesson you can learn from someone that irritates you really is a lesson about yourself, right?
absolutely.
It,
Absolutely.
it is such an opportunity to learn and kind of peel back the layers of the onion of who you are and who you want to be, your values, right? Often when we're
Mhm.
irritated, frustrated, we perceive someone is, in conflict or doing things in conflict with our values. And the message sometimes for me when I've done this exploration is well, I too violate my own values with myself, right?
Yeah, huge. That's so huge. So let's just kind of pause there and talk a little bit more about that, Laurel, because I feel like I think this came up in one of the last shows that we were recording in the last couple of months, and I remember this specifically was you asking me, well, do you struggle with guilt? And then I started talking about not really, and then saying how, and yet when I violate my own values, right, rather than feeling guilty, I judge myself. I go into judgment around it. And so this is a really interesting way to also begin to look at, the messenger, right? And the people in your life. And so if somebody that you're around brings up a lot of guilt in you or brings up a lot of self-judgment, right. We want to take the time to like look at that person and actually do what Laurel suggests here, which is who is that person? Who are they in your life? And what is it they're actually doing that's causing you to feel the way that you feel, right? What are those specific behaviors? Or what is it they're saying? Maybe you're struggling because you're like, it's not really a behavior. It's like what they keep saying over and over again, right? So that could be considered behavior. It could be an expression, right? Something they're expressing.
Yes, yeah. Um, Tell me, can
Yeah.
you think of a time when you have had this experience where um you've done that? You've someone that irritates you or brings up some emotion in you, and then you can recognize how you have done that as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I always go back to like one of my biggest lessons, right, was family and family when people were showing up and disinterested in my life, right, and just came in and just talked about themselves and never asked one question about how I was or how I am, um, and it infuriated the heck out of me. I just felt like, wow, how self-centered can you be? You don't have any interest in developing a full relationship. I had all these thoughts about it that just went on in my mind, right? And because they were family, I wasn't going to just wholly reject them. I wanted to figure out how to have a relationship that was going to work at some level. And the only way that it was ever going to work at some level was for me not to be infuriated at them all the time by that behavior because they weren't changing and they haven't changed
Yeah,
over many years. And so it took me many, many, many years, I want to say. I mean, this is not a short process, people. I feel like, this is one of those things when we're doing the inner work, we always want to just be like, oh, snap our fingers and it's done. And I don't think it always works that way. Sometimes it's a layered process. So the beginning was really acknowledging, you know, what was the specific quality because I knew what the behavior was, right? And I wasn't exhibiting it. And so I had to see where that was a shadows at work too, right? Like
yeah,
how I would never allow myself to just talk about me
you're right.
without, also inquiring about somebody else or minimizing what I had to say about myself and just focusing on the other person,
Yes,
seeing that pattern and knowing that, there was value in being able to self-express readily, holding the value in that. So it's not like, at this point in time after the sitting with it, right? So the sitting with it was identifying it myself, identifying what it was that I wouldn't do my own shadow work, right? And then all the judgment that came along. And then slowly but surely, like coming to terms with this is just the way that they operate in the world. This is how they learn to be. This is how it was okay to be, maybe celebrated to be. I don't know. And, yeah, they're not people that I'm going to be friends with outside of family, but that's who they are. And it's okay. It's not hurting me.
right.
It wasn't like it was hurting me.
And I always think that when it takes a while to learn that lesson, right? When we think
Yeah.
about a messenger bringing us an opportunity to learn and grow,
Mhm.
what is the message that we are getting from them? And they're really presenting an opportunity for us to learn more about
Yeah.
ourselves and how we interpret the world, how we experience the world. And I know I have had the same messenger. My friend Emily Clement, who is also a life coach, I think you've met Emily.
Mm,
She says, same messenger or same message, different earth suit, right?
yeah.
Where it appears time and time again. And I think about that now, hindsight. I
Mm,
so appreciate the universe giving me many opportunities to learn a lesson. And if I ignore the lesson, if I don't kind of lean in and ask, what is it here that I'm supposed to be learning from the situation? It comes back bigger and harder and, stronger, right?
yeah.
Until I can't ignore it, I know, oh, there's something for me to lean into here and figure out.
Yeah. So what's been your big one? When you think back, like,
It all comes down to the boundaries for me.
mm,
When I think, I mean, I've had three, maybe four, um, managers, bosses, at work over my career. Now we're talking a 30, since 1991, that all really, really were challenging to work for.
mm,
Really, nothing was enough, right?
uh,
Nothing was enough. And yet there was also the lack of, I'll say, respect or appreciation for what I did, right?
right. Yeah.
And so it's really interesting because when I look back on it, it was an opportunity for me to be able to learn how to speak my mind, which I didn't do. I bit my tongue a lot in my career.
Yeah.
Um, how to value my contribution, even if it wasn't valued by others, right?
Yeah.
That was a critical lesson in life. When I think about it, you know, that
Yes.
believing that I'm doing my best and that is good. That is
Yeah.
good enough.
Yeah.
Um, and so the other piece of it, so boundaries, um, the people pleasing, the need for the external validation,
Yeah.
the over functioning so that someone would be pleased with me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
All of those things, when I look back on, you know, a great career that gave me the same archetype three or four different times, and the last time it happened was not that long ago. And and I was like, oh my gosh, this woman reminds me of this person and this person and this person, all who I had relationship with at some point in the past. You
Yeah.
know, here I
Yeah.
was 20 years older thinking I was 20 years wiser, and I was still repeating the same pattern or positioning myself to receive the same opportunity to stop it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like learn it, stop it.
So a couple of things came up while you were talking, Laurel, that I want to clarify for people that I hope helps them
Yeah.
discern what we're talking about here and how they can work on it in their own life. And one was when you see someone, when you begin to be challenged by somebody and you start to wonder what are they, what, how are they your teacher? This
Yes.
is not like the lesson. You could have been confused and think the lesson was, I should just keep on working harder and harder and harder and harder until I finally get some praise from them, right? Like you could think that was the lesson.
That's probably what I did with number one, number two, right?
Well,
I
and
learned it.
oftentimes, yeah, oftentimes we do that, right? And then all of a sudden we realize, well, I'm working day and night. I don't see my family at all. I'm stressed. I have anxiety, so I'm taking pills now. Like you could start naming all the things that we're doing right here to just try to keep up and perform and do the thing, when maybe the lesson was to do what you said, which is, wow, I show up every day at work. I stay extra. I work. I think it seems that my work is good because nobody's complaining about it and nobody's sending it back to me, right? And so, wow, I think I'm probably just doing a good job. Where's the limit of what I feel like I need to contribute here that feels good to me? And if it's not enough, then maybe I'm not their person.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because I'm going to say that oftentimes we don't even know it's an opportunity to learn, or we don't see it as an opportunity. We don't see a lesson in it until, as I mentioned, at least in my experience, it comes back bigger and bigger and bigger, right? To
Right.
the point where then it's like, okay, all right, something's here. I've
Yeah.
got to, I've got to face this, right?
Yeah.
Um, and what a incredible one, of course, the beauty of hindsight, right? What an incredible experience to have a a very externally focused career for 30 years and then leave that, walk away from that career and open a coaching business where I am selling my services and myself, right?
Yeah.
I, if I had not learned a lesson of how to find value in myself, regardless of external validation or not,
Yeah.
I couldn't be sitting where I am today.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It would be impossible.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Do I wish I had learned it sooner? Yes, absolutely.
Well, that's the thing, right? So, I do feel like, I want to come back to me talking about it took me years, right, to come to terms with that and not be inwardly grinding around it, right?
Yes,
Instead, just saying, oh, this is the way it is, and I'm okay with it, and this is the reason I'm here, and I'm okay with that, and so onward we go, and we can have whatever it is we have, and that's okay,
it
right?
is.
And not inwardly grind and not inwardly, have a story around it and that's painful, right? That's the goal here, right? So the goal here always is we want to take ourselves out of suffering, right?
Absolutely.
We can't stop other people's suffering. We can be supportive, compassionate, kind, whatever, in the appropriate ways, but only we stop our own suffering and come to terms with, the pain that is part of being human. And
Yes.
so, yeah, I mean, this is the work.
And when we carry a story and we replay that story in our mind, in our thoughts, and we carry the story in our body, we prolong the suffering
Yes.
from that story, right?
Abs-
We had suffering when we experienced it the first time, and then
right.
every time we replay it, we continue the suffering.
All right, so let's just pause right there, Lil. I want to make sure that everybody really like takes that in because this is one of the challenges in doing this work for many of us. For many of us that want to make things right in our mind and our hearts, oftentimes we think by reviewing the story that we can change the story. And so you heard, everybody who listened to this podcast heard, right? The beginning of my story around it all. They don't care about people, they just care about themselves. They want it, right? And then my story here at the end was, look, we're here, we're each here for our own reason. It's okay. We don't have to have more than what we have and let it be what it is, right? Well, that story morphed and changed over time through me not necessarily making it that way by repeating it, but by continuing to put the story down
Yes.
and not
Yes.
going over it and over it and over it and over it, but instead saying, we're different. Oh, well.
Yeah. I always think about this that, all of the experience that we have so many experiences in life, good and bad, right?
Yeah.
But the ones that we carry are the ones that we consider to be bad, right?
Yeah.
And I just think about this backpack of rocks that we carry
I
because in
know.
our little monkey minds,
I
we are
know.
holding on to these, you know, things that happened to us and we're carrying those stories and they weigh us down.
I know.
And
I
how
know.
can we just, you know,
Lighten the load.
recognize it as
Yeah.
if it's a Netflix series and it comes to an end? Just put it down, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it's so interesting when I think about the life lessons. There's that saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, right?
Yeah.
And and so if you, our listeners, are in this place where you've experienced some things and you're not ready to let it down, you're not ready to really look at what is the lesson here for me? Just notice, you know, is the situation a repeating pattern? Is the archetype, the person you're, in relationship with or appears in your life, is it a repeatable character, right?
Yeah,
Because I think those are the clues. Like when I started,
absolutely.
third boss in that had the same characteristics, and I, of course, had the same role in the
Habits, work
relationship,
habits.
right?
Yeah,
Right?
right. Yeah.
Right? I was like, oh, this this is something. This is something's happening here, right? But
Yeah.
it took me a while.
Yeah.
So be patient with yourself if you're listening, and just know when you're ready, the work is so good.
Yeah. And you know, to be able to gently, but firmly with yourself, right? Say, if I just keep repeating this, what am I getting out of it? Right? What is the thing that how am I benefiting from staying in the same role in the same place in the story, right? And so for me, if I stayed stuck in that story, my benefit at some level would be I feel better than I'm the martyr here. I can come and be with these people that just don't have any social graces or whatever it is in my mind the story was, and I can just be okay with it because XYZ, right? And so to just be able to like do a fearless moral inventory, as they like to say, right? In the 12-step program of what are you getting from it? What's your contribution to this whole thing? And why are you staying in the same role in the same story over and over and over again when you
Yes.
really could change it up if you had the motivation and desire? Yeah.
And I love that question. And that is a question that I ask, how is this serving me? Right.
Hmm.
And so when you think about that, because we we're getting something out of it,
Yeah.
when we're staying in a situation or we're not willing to recognize a lesson or an opportunity to change and grow, and we're choosing to stay in a situation, it is serving us in
Yeah.
some way.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Ooh, Laurel, I don't know. I think that that's probably a good place to wrap there. We have some
I
great
think so.
journaling questions here. I have a feeling we're probably going to come back before the end of the month and touch in and out of this topic a little bit. The topics that we have for the month of June with this life lessons and repeating patterns will have some overlap to them. So we'll be kind of in and out of how to work with all of these really challenges. They're challenges of the inner work that are great opportunity if you're willing to take it for really feeling like you're empowered and
Yes,
uh, and you're growing yourself and growing into the potential that's there for you, and that feels really good. Yeah,
it does.
yeah.
It might not feel good, and we talked about this like every moment doing the work, but I know the transformation, like the growth, looking back, you start to realize how very far you've come, and that feels really good.
I know, and not to be suffering in the stories. I mean, look at,
Yes.
our examples. Use our examples for today, right? Is I really don't suffer in that story anymore, Laurel. I can hear that you don't either. You don't show
No,
up in the same way, and I don't show up in the same way. And and we did it. Nobody else was on the other side saying,
yeah,
"Hey,"
I know.
inviting
I
ourselves to the
know.
table of doing this transformational work.
That's
Yeah.
right. It's so interesting. I just want to tell you that in my business, now my mantra is I'm not for everyone and everyone's not for me.
Yeah.
And I think about that and I think if I could have had that attitude when I was 15, 16, 25, 32,
Yeah.
my life would have been different, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how wonderful now to be able to be in that place because of the lessons, the opportunities for learning and growing that I had.
So good.
Yeah,
So good.
yeah,
Maybe we all take that out as a mantra from this show. I'm not for everyone and everyone's not for me. I mean, just think about how many billions of people there are in the world. Goodness gracious, of course we're not for everybody. Everybody's not for us. We'd be exhausted.
we'd be very busy.
Yes, busy and exhausted for
I
sure.
know.
All
All right,
right,
Laura.
Laura.
Wonderful to be with you as always.
Same here. Thanks for being with us, listeners, and we'll see you next week right here.
Yes.
Beautiful work, beautiful life. Bye for now,
Bye.
everybody.